It's nice to see all of you this evening. I particularly want to thank you for joining us for this special time of honoring Dr. Lemley. I want you to think in terms tonight that we pause in the mid-wonders of our daily lives to reflect and think back on many golden moments of times past. And I said times past. I know some of you think mine is past, but it does depend on one's perspective, and I see 1965 like it was yesterday when I met you. So we are very pleased that you have come to help us celebrate the life and work of Dr. Lemley. Also to celebrate Dr. Mrs. Lemley, because she did so many things as a team. When I first met them in 1965 at a CD banquet where my wife was the sponsor, they were working together, and they've been working together ever since. And so I applaud you very much for that. Now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. McDowell, our president, to join me and to give opening remarks and then lead us in our prayer.
Thank you, Doc, and it is a pleasure to celebrate the Lemleys this evening. And it's also neat to have, I'm number 7, so we've got 4, 5, 6, and 7 here tonight. Ken Jones and Susie are here, Tim and Lucy Perrin, and of course the doctors Emily and Steve. Dr. Lemley's really a special person, and Steve's not bad either, right? What a joy to be with you. I really am blessed to follow these leaders, and I genuinely can say that each one of them left it better than they found it. And I am the beneficiary of all of y'all's hard work. And I found out, a lot of you know Steve and Emily better than I do. I've been incredibly blessed to be around them. And he is a man with good advice, but he doesn't force it on anybody. What a genuine gentleman he is. But we got to sit down during my inauguration week, and I sat down with all 3 of the former presidents and their wives, and they shared insights with me. And I'll never forget, Steve said, "Be honest, but don't be too honest." I also had another president from another institution tell me that I had a gold mine sitting on my campus and I ought to pay attention to him. And he said he wrote me a letter. He said, "You need to talk to him and see if you can get a copy of that letter." And I did. And that letter is, in fact, a gold mine of great advice. So Dr. Steve Lemley, I'm very grateful for you, and Dr. Emily Lemley, grateful for you. I had the opportunity with Ken Jones to speak in Frisco over the weekend, and my topic was a life that matters. A life that matters. And so I spent the last several weeks thinking about that and asking people about that. Dr. Lemley's, you've definitely lived lives that matter. But one of my best conversations was with my good friend Marvin Crossnow that I play racquetball with. He's 78 years old. It was his birthday, and I said, "Marvin, what advice do you have about a life that matters?" And he thought for a minute, and he said, "Well, I'll tell you, one of the most important things is marry well." And he did, and you did, my friend. So we're grateful for the Lemleys. We're grateful that you're here, and you're going to hear stories as we celebrate them tonight. Let's begin our evening together with prayer. God, we're so thankful to you that we're at a place like Lubbock Christian University where we can honor and revere and hold your name up high and call on you for blessing. And God, you have been with us every step of the way. And we're so thankful for your presence. We're so thankful for your blessing. I'm thankful for these men and women who have served here for so many years, and there are so many gathered in this room that have a stake and an interest in this place. And God, we're thankful for the heritage of this institution. And tonight, Father, as we celebrate the Lemleys, we just pray that we will, in fact, be able to communicate to them our great appreciation and our great indebtedness to their service. God, thank you for the night that's ahead of us. Thank you for the food we're about to eat. Thank you for the great opportunity for fellowship. And we pray that your Spirit would move among us and bless this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'd like to thank Dr. Ruth Holmes, who played our dinner music for us. I should add, for those who don't realize this, the piano that she was playing was given by the Young family for us to use in this facility. So thank you, Ruth. And she served as a faculty member underneath the dean and the president named Lemley. That's true, sir. And I would also like to ask you to express appreciation to Salvador and Randy and their crew for their excellent meal. Tonight we invited some special guests to share their vantage point and their perspective of Dr. Stephen Lemley. And Steve, I was disappointed I was not included. I thought that was the reason. I just wanted to hear it from you. But I would like for us to consider first from the perspective of the faculty, and I'm going to introduce the speakers, and then I'm disappearing for a while. Representing the faculty is Dr. Laurie Doyle. She was a student and then staff member, then faculty member throughout Dr. Lemley's years as dean and then as president. She has served as our Comm Fine Arts Department chair since 2006, and I had written that she is one of the most senior members of the faculty, having served as a faculty member since 1983, and I think my tenure as an adjunct just ended. The table back there where I was seated, which is the Comm Fine Arts, they told me I was crazy and that I should substitute the word exalted for her, and so Dr. Doyle, the exalted chair. Also, representing the Board of Trustees, Mr. David Stewart, and I'm looking forward to this presentation because David and Steve were at LCC together and have been longtime friends, and David's perspective is one who lived across the hall from Steve in Johnson Hall. So there can be some very interesting insights provided by this board member concerning the student and then concerning the president. So I look forward with great anticipation to that presentation, David. Also, from the office of the president, President Tim Perrin, who was our 6th president, served from the years 2012 to 2019, and I am so pleased that he's back. He is now Senior Vice President for Strategic Implementation at Pepperdine, and I think we will see an interesting perspective from this young man. His parents taught here and were under Dean Lemley and President Perrin, and this young man grew up witnessing a lot of us when we were younger, and that I think will provide an interesting perspective, particularly since former President Perrin was a student leader. He was an athlete, leader of the Shap Brigade, active member in that, and so that gives you an interesting perspective. When he became president, he brought Dr. Lemley back to serve as an advisor and faculty member. Now, on the serious side, we're very pleased to have Dr. Sarah Young Jackson here tonight, who is Chancellor of Pepperdine. She knows the history of Dr. Lemley's work at Pepperdine, as well as the prestige that he and Dr. Emily Lemley have within the Pepperdine community. She is also the sister of Dr. Emily Perrin, and we're delighted to have you. Dr. David Lemley will not be with us tonight because Southwest Airlines had a little problem. And so, Dr. Lemley, I was thinking that your former executive committee, Bill Phillips, Dr. Estep, Dr. Blackwood, and I could really fill that 5-minute gap. And yet my wife said no. And so I guess we will pass. So these are the folks that are going to be presenting their perspectives of Dr. Lemley. Dr. Doyle.
Now, Steve, you said you'd still be my friend after this. I'm really thrilled to be here tonight to help honor Dr. Lemley, although I can't say I'm thrilled to be labeled a senior member of the faculty, but I guess if you stay around long enough, that's going to happen. I only have a few moments to speak, and I know we could go all evening singing the praises of Dr. Stephen Lemley and his work as part of the LCU faculty. Now, I have two special personal memories of Steve in academic settings. When I was graduating from LCC a few years ago, we were having commencement rehearsal in the field house. Dr. Lemley was dean of the college, and he called me up on the stage to demonstrate to the escorts how to hood the candidate. I was so excited that he knew my name, and I knew it would impress my father. But then, after I got up on the stage, I had to bend way back for Dr. Lemley to get the hood over my head. Sorry, I had to have one little thing in there. Then in 2012, I was called in and told that the new President Perrin was bringing a faculty member from Pepperdine with him, and that I would get this new teacher in my department. Immediately, my mind was asking, who is this teacher? Will he like my department and me? Will he fit in well? Will we like him? 2 seconds later, I heard it was Dr. Lemley, and I went from being worried to again being thrilled. Although I did still wonder if he, as a former dean and president, could work with someone he knew only as an undergrad and an adjunct faculty member. He's been gracious and kind to me since he returned, and an incredible colleague to all of the faculty. When Steve arrived at Pepperdine in 1972 to work in student services, he also taught a class each semester. When he became dean at LCC in 1978, he continued to teach until being named president. And then in 1993, he returned to Pepperdine as provost, and 7 years later went back to full-time teaching, continuing as he returned here to Lubbock, always teaching. Steve is a gifted and articulate educator. He has anchored the upper division courses in COM for us. The best students have sought out his classes and are impressed with his wide knowledge and experience. His classes are challenging, but he teaches with grace and humor. He's a great advocate for the study of communication, posting on his door to his office the key reasons one should study COM, and he keeps up with the data evaluating trends in the subject. Steve has been a wonderful and encouraging colleague. He supports our department and the university fully in all our activities, and even asked if he could keep attending our department meetings. Of course you can. It's crazy, but of course you can. The entire LCU faculty thanks you, Steve, for your love of the university, your excellent example of scholarship, and your leadership. We have the greatest respect for you, sir. Thank you.
Steve Lemley and I lived directly across the hall from each other, as Doc Williams mentioned. And I think maybe the high point of living across the hall from him was when he was a popular guy and drew a lot of attention. And so we decided to stuff his room with paper. When you take an entire wing of a dorm and all the guys work on that, you can put a lot of newspaper in one dorm room. And so Steve, we were all kind of keeping our eye out for him, and he comes walking down the hall. He gets, people are peeking out looking to see what's going to happen, and gets his key out, and he unlocks the door and pushes that door, and you could hear the door snap back. We have so much paper inside. And he says, what? And of course, when he said, what? Everybody just died laughing, And I'm sure if Ken Rhodes had seen how much paper we had in that hall and stretched all the way down to the incinerator, he would probably have seen a fire hazard, and we'd all been in trouble. Whew, this thing comes and goes, then. So in 1982, my dad was serving on the board of Lubbock Christian, and I didn't know this. I hadn't, from the time I left here and moved back to Grants, well, I wasn't very well connected for a number of years there. But anyway, I knew he was on the board, and he caught me in the office and said, hey, he said, we just hired a new president. And I said, oh, who's that? And he said, Dr. Stephen Lemley, with, he had somewhat of amount of pride in his voice when he said it. And I said, really? I said, well, I couldn't think of a better man. And so Dad really felt good about it then. So it was a blessing to my dad and to myself. And we were thrilled to know that Lubbock Christian would be led by him. When I entered Lubbock Christian in the fall, I guess, of 63, 64 year, Emily and I were both in Dr. Mosier's class. And if you know Dr. Mosier, he had written a book back in 1957 called The Gist of Romans. And if you hadn't heard of it and you think, well, I'm going to get that and read it, well, you won't read it. You have to study it. It's a course. And it's the shortest little book you ever saw, but it takes quite a while to work through all the knowledge that he put into that book. Anyway, Brother Mosier lectured, and as he lectured, well, then he would lecture for a while, and then he'd ask questions. And so I was enjoying Romans, and I ventured to hold my hand up one day after he asked a question. I answered the question, and he said, he kind of frowned, and grimaced a little bit, and he said, well, that's close, but he said, does anybody else? And Emily's hand went up. And Emily gave him the answer, and he says, that is perfect. Perfect, It was a tough crowd to be in, so. But I was blessed to be in the same class with her, and we've all been friends ever since. So early on, becoming friends with Steve, well, I noticed he and Emily were spending a lot of time together. And so I'd see them around campus all the time together. So one day I said, Steve, have you kissed her yet? And he was real quiet for a little bit. And then he said, well, no, do you think she wants me to? And I said, probably. And so from that day forward, then every time I would be at LCU and I'd be in a setting where Steve was in front of the audience, he would tell that story to see if my head would still glow red when he was telling about it. And so I want to tell you the truth, though. I mean, I can't believe, knowing how particular Steve is about everything, I don't think he just went out and planted one on her, Knowing Steve, I think he went out and asked for permission. And of course, she must have said yes. He was bragging to me just a few months ago about, yeah, and he's still kissing her on a daily basis, he said. Anyway, it's been a blessing to have them as friends and to still have them as friends today. And there's a lot in their lives to be admired. We're thankful for the good work they've done here and for all the things that Dr. Lemley instituted and that has brought us to this day right here, along with you other fellows, Tim and Dr. Jones. So if you go to LCU and you stick around for a while, well, what happens is eventually you get to be related to these people. You know, you're not just friends. We've got nephews in common. We've got Josiah, Malcolm, Norval Young sitting back here. And now we've even got a great nephew, Bennett Young Stewart. Is that right? Yeah. And the funny thing about those two guys is I've seen both of them when they were babies. They looked like Norval Young. I'll guarantee they did. Their heads were shaped just like him. I said that about Bennett, and Steve says, you remember what Josiah looked like? But Steve, we are thankful to have this opportunity to honor you today, and we've been blessed to be able to have you as our president and to work with you when you were at Pepperdine. You were a member of our board, and you and I were on the board together, and that was a blessing as well. And we're thankful for those times. Thank you.
So great to be here and to be with you all tonight. What a thrill to get to be in this room. I always feel like in moments like this, I just want to go around and introduce everybody, give everybody a chance to speak. There's so many people here that need to be heard from. There's so many of you that have stories about Steve and Emily. And I am so thrilled that Doc is still doing the MC duties at these events. I think he may have lost a little bit of perspective. He repeatedly referred to me as a young man, which was perhaps true at one time, but it's been a few years since I think that was an accurate description. So glad to be with you all tonight, and couldn't do anything that would bring me more joy than sharing with you how much I appreciate Steve and Emily Lemley, who are truly LCU giants. Steve has devoted himself to Christian higher education for more than 50 years. When I think about his roles at LCU, he's been a student, a professor, a dean in academic administration. He's been the president, and he's been a board member. He's really provided the meaningful contributions to LCU for much of his life. When I think of Steve and Emily, I think of trusted and trustworthy friends. I think of loyal and wise and caring mentors. I think of generous hosts. So thankful for them both. Steve, in many ways, is LCU's historian. He's our archivist. He is, in some ways, LCU's conscience. No one has more understanding of LCU's past than Steve Lemley. When Warren McNeil and I were thinking about putting together a collection of essays about LCU's first 60 years, we knew that the one person we had to get on board was Steve Lemley. If Steve thought it was a good idea and was willing to jump in with both feet, this could work. And when Steve said, yes, I'm willing to do it, and then wrote all the important chapters. We didn't ask much, just write about the founding, write about Dr. Mosier, write about F.W. Maddox, write about Gene Hancock, write the important chapters, and he did, and the book was better for it. I carry mine around. I don't know about you. Bible, LCU's first 60 years. This is kind of how I roll. I don't know what you're doing with Steve and Emily embody the LCU spirit so beautifully. They share a deep humility and a practical wisdom. They live out a servant's spirit and practice otherworldly hospitality. They offer an anxious world a calm and peace-filled presence. I want to be more like Steve and Emily when I grow up. I expect many of you can say the same thing. Thinking about my mom and dad tonight, Doc mentioned that, but I can't come to these events without thinking about my mom and dad, who served here so faithfully for so many years and worked under Dr. Lemley, and we're so thankful for him. And my dad was he could be a bit of a critic. He didn't just accept, no one I'm sure here knows that. It's a surprise to many of you. But he held Steve and Emily in the highest regard. He adored them and appreciated their leadership and their leadership of Love a Christian. And that means a lot to me, especially on nights like tonight. So Steve became president in 1982 and served from 1982 to 1993. And as president, he did many things, way too many for me to mention tonight. I just want to talk about a couple, and then I'm going to move on to other things I want to talk about. But for instance, he just unilaterally decided one day that LCU was a university. And he announced it. They had a big party, September of 1987, and it became true. And then they worked to try to make it look like a university. And he had a huge impact on that as well, reorganizing the college. And a couple of guys, I don't know, Gary Estep and Don Williams as the initial dean, and started graduate programs, and lo and behold, LCU became a university. When you think about Steve's contributions, I think about the board of trustees. I was counting, and I think that during his time, there were 24 people added to the board. And many of them still serving today. It's a legacy that Steve Lemley leaves at LCU that's very meaningful impact. I'll look around the room. David Stewart is one of those. Bill Bundy is one of those. Doug Parent, in a moment of brilliant service, stepped forward and served on the LCU board. And so many others who are here. We're really thankful for Steve's leadership in that way. Steve brought stability. He brought a calm and a confidence to a college that desperately needed it, that wanted his calm presence. And that was a meaningful contribution. But I want to spend the rest of my time talking about rocks and mentors. So first, mentors. When I was a student here, Steve became president. So it happened while I was about midway through my tenure at Love a Christian. And I can remember Steve's inauguration because someone somehow asked me to speak at the inauguration as a representative of students. And I just thought there had to be a mistake. I couldn't believe that they were wanting me to speak. During my inauguration, Steve replayed video of me, and it's really deeply embarrassing what I said and did on that occasion. But that was one of those times where Steve believed I could do something that I didn't know myself I could do. He believed in me, and he called me forward to greater excellence and greater ability, more than I thought I was capable of. And that happened over and over again through my life. Steve kept opening doors for me, kept calling me forward. At Pepperdine, when he was provost, he invited me to be the chair of a committee, and I was just a young faculty member minding my own business, to reimagine our university teaching award. And I just said, Steve, are you sure? I mean, I'll do whatever you ask, but really, me? And he said, I'm sure. And in many ways, that opened the door for me to think about administrative roles moving forward. And over again, Steve called me forward to more and believing in what I had to offer in ways that have really changed my life. And I'm so grateful for that. And I know so many of you have similar stories about the way Steve poured into your life and called you forward to greater things than you thought were possible. And then there's rocks, a recurring theme in Steve's leadership and in Emily's, in many ways, is rocks. Steve is responsible for procuring the John Wayne rock that still to this day sits in the library. And the story of how that rock came to LCU is a fantastic story. You should all read the chapter about it in this book, written by Steve Lemley. I can remember when I was president, I had this idea that wouldn't it be great to move the John Wayne rock out of the library and create an outdoor sculpture garden where we could have some art, we could enjoy, the John Wayne head would be the centerpiece of this beautiful outdoor sculpture garden, and I was really excited about it. I was really talking to people about it, thought this is the way to go. It's going to be so great. And I'll never forget the day Steve came to my office and we had a conversation. It was something like this. It was very gentle, it was very kind, but it was something like this. Tim, you can't put the rock outside. Why not? It's a rock. He said, no, the climate in West Texas, it will damage the rock. It will be terrible for the rock. You can't put the rock outside. And as I typically did, I said, yes, sir, that was the end of the outdoor sculpture garden. There is no outdoor sculpture garden at LCU. But the John Wayne rock is alive and well. It still sits in the library. When I started as president here, Emily started a tradition of every year of service, she would bring a rock to our house to just mark that moment of service at LCU. I've told this story before, but it was so impactful. These were not John Wayne-sized rocks, but they were still large rocks nonetheless. They had a scripture on them just to mark the moment, to remind us of God's faithfulness. And like Jacob of old, we took those rocks as our Ebenezer stones. We put them in our yard, and we built one rock after another for every year of service. And it was so powerful. It was such a reminder of God's faithfulness and his goodness in good times and bad. And so like Jacob, when he slept that night at Bethel, the house of God, we say, because of the good influence of Steve and Emily, we say, God is here. And I didn't even know it. How amazing is this place? This is the very house of God. Thank you for that powerful reminder of God's faithfulness and goodness. Steve and Emily have blessed this place beyond measure. And so all we can do is say thank you. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for the legacy you leave. It's an amazing legacy of faithfulness and excellence, commitment and joy. You've made this place better because of your remarkable service. We look up to you with admiration and appreciation.
Thank you all. That's wonderful. Good evening. I feel so honored to be asked to say a few words tonight, honoring my dear brother-in-law, Stephen Lemley. I've been asked to represent Pepperdine as chancellor tonight, and I do, and gladly, but I can't separate that from my deep and long relationship with Steve as my brother-in-law. So it's going to be a little bit of a mix between the two. I'm the youngest of 4 children, the daughter of Helen and Norval Young, and I'm approximately 9 years younger than Emily and Steve. I really take pride in that at this stage of my life. Every year is important. But I was always the kid sister, standing in the background, watching my older sibling Emily launch into adulthood. I'll never forget when Emily boarded a train headed for Lubbock Christian College at the age of 18. I didn't witness Emily and Steve first meeting at the LCU campus, but I was home that summer when Steve and his parents, Francis and Plummer Lemley, arrived at our front door at the President's home on the Los Angeles campus. Ring the doorbell, and we welcomed them. They were on a vacation driving from New Mexico, and I heard it told that Plummer really encouraged Steve to visit Emily, who he had been dating. I served the lemonade to the adults visiting in the living room, and as introductions were made and everyone got to know each other, we were excited. Of course, we didn't know that Steve would be Helen and Norval's future son-in-law. There was a lot of excitement in the air as Emily was visited by her LCU suitor. Well, I say there was a lot of excitement for me in the air But I'm sure there was one in that small group who was not quite as excited as I was to meet her suitor. Norval Young was a very protective father of his oldest and sweetest daughter. And he was protective of all of his girls. The romance blossomed as Steve visited Emily during her Pepperdine year in Europe, in Heidelberg. And they were married at the Vermont Avenue Church of Christ on the Pepperdine campus in 1967. I was in 8th grade, and Marilyn was in 9th grade, my sister. We were so thrilled to be her bridesmaids, all wearing hats that Helen Pepperdine had made for us. Frances Lemley had made the wedding cake, and Mother was working so hard to be sure every detail was set. It was a thrilling day. I have lots and lots of Steve and Emily stories, but I'll sum it up by saying that Steve Lemley has been a gift to the Young family through the past 56 years. Through the family's times of deep suffering and our many times of joyful celebration. Steve has been a rock. We could count on Steve, whatever lot life brought to the Young family. Always a man of strong faith, integrity, perseverance, and commitment to Christ and his church. Steve has been a model of faithfulness in marriage and fiercely loyal to Emily. He has been consistently supportive and encouraging to her, empowering her to develop and share her exceptional gifts with others. Steve is and always has been an example to all in the Young family, a true role model for children and grandchildren, a godly man who strives for excellence and integrity in all that he does. He has had a long history with Pepperdine, not only as an alumnus, but one who has worn many professional hats. After receiving his PhD from Ohio State, he came to serve as the Assistant Dean of Students at our brand new opening of the Malibu campus in 1972. And I was a student there, transferring from Lipscomb at the time. He later became the Dean of Students at Pepperdine. In 1978, they moved to Lubbock to assume the dean's role and later to step into the presidency. They returned to Pepperdine in 1993. Then President David Davenport recruited Steve to come to work by his side as the provost. He served in that role for 7 years. Steve and Dave Davenport formed a powerful partnership and had a deep admiration and respect for each other. Steve was known for winning over very difficult people with his honesty, respect, patience, and willingness to listen. David Davenport found that a great asset. In leadership meetings at Pepperdine today, we still refer to a document that Steve Lemley penned regarding the complexity of Pepperdine's DNA and its Christian mission. It has provided an inspiring philosophical view of our mission. He understood Pepperdine's unique role in the world in a way that no one else did. And he communicated that through his writing so eloquently that it is still appreciated and referred to today. As provost, he managed the recruitment, the search committees, and the selection of 4 of Pepperdine school deans. He oversaw our successful accreditation process and is remembered for his impassioned stand before the governing body of the Western Accreditation Association for the freedom of private education to practice its deeply held values. When David Davenport moved on from his position as president, Steve moved to a full-time teaching position in communications and taught at Pepperdine for 12 years, also serving as the interim divisional dean during that period. Pepperdine University owes a great deal to Stephen Lemley for sharing with us his passion for Christian higher education combined with his exceptional gifts in administration and teaching. Steve was a powerful force for good on our campus. He stood for all that is holy and right in the world and gave us all something we could believe in. Steve, on this celebratory occasion, and as a representative of Pepperdine University, We salute you and express our deepest gratitude for your sacrificial service. We love you.
So I am not David Lemley, I am Mark Lemley. My big brother wishes he could be here tonight, and we sure wish he could too. But he wrote a beautiful tribute, and I'd love to take this opportunity to read it. So thank you to the Board of Trustees and many other colleagues, friends, and co-laborers of my parents for providing an opportunity to honor our dad, Steve Lemley. I can't possibly say everything our family would surely like to about him here, but I can offer our sincere gratitude to you for making this possible. My sister, Amy, that's my sister too. My sister, Amy, recently heard Daddy retelling the story of his father running into their home on the New Mexico gas plant that our grandfather supervised to alert our grandmother and young Stephen about a fire. He instructed them to drive as far away as possible before turning around himself and running directly into the fire empty-handed to extinguish it. This left a significant impression on Stephen. He says when he saw his dad do that, he knew that's how he wanted to be. There might be some pauses in this while I compose. Our parents' work was a meaningful part of our lives growing up, and Lubbock Christian University has always felt like more than a place. It has been a cause, a mission, and a means of participating in God's work in the world, as well as a great place, as our mother Emily has said, for short people to meet and marry. The campus, the students, and the staff and faculty were familiar parts of our growing up. Catherine Lynch and John King and Don Williams. That's who my brother listed, and as I look around, so many more. Were names as familiar and loved as many of our extended family. And what I've learned about my parents, and my father in particular, through my time in Christian education and ministry, is that the people he worked with and served in his career felt this way about him. What I most hear about him from people impacted by his service is not praise for the things he accomplished, although there are many, like the U and LCU, in which we take pride. What people stop me to talk about is the difference he made in their lives, the opportunities he created, the lives he strengthened, the devotion he demonstrated, and the integrity, humility, and wisdom with which he serves. And what I would like you to know is that's what we see too. That's truly who Steve Lemley is. I don't know of another man with the kind of integrated life of faith, service, and love that he's modeled for his children and family. The best you saw of him at work was exactly what we got, and more. We grew up attending associate sales, hosting university guests, and listening to best friends woo prospective students in K-Bob steakhouses across the plains. Daddy would take us with him when he'd preach out of town regularly enough that we still know some of his sermons. We still occasionally look quizzically at one another and ask, "What is that in your hand?" as an inside joke about one of his most well-delivered lines. As you may know, this wasn't originally a reference to one of the 6 Lemley and Carey grandchildren gripping something they shouldn't be eating, but to a story about Moses in Exodus 4. God has called Moses to step out of rural obscurity into Pharaoh's court, and with a pretty big ask. Moses understandably wants to know, what if they won't listen to me? "What is that in your hand?" God responds. and a shepherd's staff becomes a sign of the God who delivers. As someone who comes from a long line of fundraisers, I see the genius here, don't you? And if not, let me ask you, brothers and sisters, what is that in your hand? Because just a monthly gift of $25 can contribute toward a Christian liberal arts education to a deserving student like your own children. But Daddy never asked us to be fundraisers. And I can tell you that I wrote that bit entirely in hindsight because at the time, it was just the voice of a person whose faith and life showed exactly this kind of willingness to hear God's call and live it. And we knew that when our parents went to work, they carried the boldness and trust of Moses in every step. Through the West Texas plains, into boardrooms, and high-rise offices, and international conferences, with only the faith to do what is next. And hands full of not much more than cranberry loaves or logo-adorned fountain pens. And look what God has delivered with their faith for LCU, and look what God has done with that chapter of faithfulness for us. Like his dad, I watched my dad and my mom run nearly empty-handed into acts of sacrificial service, often fires that took years to put out. No one else even knew they were fighting. And then come home and demonstrate that faith in the way they loved us day but today. Like Stephen watching his dad run into that work, I always knew that was what I wanted to be. And of all his accomplishments, I think you know, as we do, that the legacy he and my mother leave is the one written on our hearts, which will witness to what God can do for generations of his family, and certainly in your families as well.
Thank you, Mark. I will send a note to David that he had a very nice, well-written document that was read very effectively by his brother. Thank you for sharing that. Sir, it's my honor to present a gift to you. The department suggested a watch, but since you're retiring and you won't have need for a watch, we chose something else. And I want to show you this from up here because I think you've had such a major role in creating this, and particularly now I found out concerning the dating of short people that you had a goal in mind. But we have a painting of the mall, which during your presidency we began to shape. He sent us as executive committee out every day to build something, lay concrete. But sir, when we walk down that mall now, we take great pride because it is a center of activity, and it's a center where students can meet, the swings, the benches, etc. So thank you, sir, for that vision and for the opportunity to create a place of community, which we so value at Lubbock Christian. Now I'd like to introduce you to two additional folks. Dr. Stacy Patty, who's Dean of Hancock College of Honors and Liberal Arts, was a student when Dr. Lemley became president. Dr. Lemley hired Stacy in 1992, And Dr. Patty is going to present Dr. Lemley as Distinguished Professor Emeritus in just a minute. I would also like to introduce Dr. Jeff Carey, who's Dean of the Alfred and Patricia Smith College of Biblical Studies. And Dr. Carey is going to have a brief statement as the favorite son-in-law of the Lemleys. He's going to present a perspective on church life and influence, as well as a personal story and reflection, and he will close our evening with a prayer. So Dr. Patty.
I'd like to ask Dr. Sean Hughes to come forward for a special presentation. And while he's coming forward, I want to thank all of you for your attendance here tonight, for the support you give to the Lemleys by being here. I want to thank especially the LCU Board of Trustees for underwriting this evening, and the deans of all 6 academic units of this university for helping with special table sponsorships. We all wanted to represent for LCU, for the Lemleys, our support. Dr. Hughes?
Very pleased to be able to handcraft something here for the Lemleys. This is for both Doctors Lemley, and we appreciate you both. And I personally want to thank Steve for being a mentor, being a boss, and being a friend for so many years. And so many times you'll see me in his office, and it's a wonderful thing to have an office just 2 doors down from Dr. Lemley. So let me read you the bottom of this. It says, Lubbock Christian University handcrafted vase made expressly to honor Doctors Stephen and Emily Lemley for a lifetime of service to Christian higher education and the church. Crafted by myself, this vase contains, and I won't bore you with a whole list of woods, presented at the Lemley Legacy Dinner, April 18th, 2023. Congratulations.
If I could invite the Doctors Lemley to come forward, please. It's my duty to my honor to present this resolution of Lubbock Christian University. I will read it and then pass it on. Resolution of Lubbock Christian University in recognition of Dr. Stephen S. Lemley, with profound appreciation to Dr. Stephen S. Lemley upon his retirement. Whereas Stephen Lemley graduated from Lubbock Christian University in the class of 1965, received baccalaureate and master's degrees from Pepperdine University and his PhD in communication from The Ohio State University in 1973. Whereas Stephen Lemley served Pepperdine University as Associate Dean of Student Life from 1972 to 1976, Dean of Student Life from 1976 to 1978, Chairperson of the Communication Division from 2008 to 2010, and Provost from 1993 to 2000. Whereas Stephen Lemley served Lubbock Christian University as Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of the College from 1978 to 1982, and as President from 1982 to 1993. Whereas Stephen Lemley received the distinction of University Fellow at The Ohio State University in 1971, an Honorary Doctor of Laws from Pepperdine University in 1988, and the F.W. Maddox Award for Outstanding Service to Lubbock Christian University as an alumnus in 1993. Whereas Stephen Lemley served faithfully on the LCU Lubbock Christian University Board of Trustees from 1982 to 2012, including as chair of 2 committees, and has served on numerous civic boards, including those for the Texas Tech University International Cultural Center, Lubbock Christian School, and the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce. Whereas Stephen Lemley served as minister of Churches of Christ in Ohio and California, taught adult Bible class series, and presented special lectures at churches and university lectureships in Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, and served as an elder of the Conejo Valley Church of Christ. Whereas Stephen and Emily Lemley have prepared and team-taught Bible classes and lecture series in churches and at universities, led marriage enrichment programs, and since 1975 have co-edited the Power for Today devotional periodical. Whereas Stephen and Emily Lemley have been married for 56 years, have raised 3 children, and have modeled in their marriage the Christian virtues of patience, hope, and love. Whereas Stephen Lemley has delivered scholarly presentations in communication studies, the role of rhetoric in congressional leadership, and the history of the Stone Campbell movement, has written extensively regarding Christian higher education, and especially on the stories and legacies of Lubbock Christian University and Pepperdine University, and has led numerous accreditation committees and written crucial reaffirmation documents. Whereas Stephen Lemley taught on the faculty in the Communication Division at Pepperdine University as assistant professor from 1972 to 1978, and as associate professor from 2001 to 2012. Whereas Stephen Lemley taught on the faculty in the Communication and Fine Arts Department at Lubbock Christian University as associate professor from 1978 to 1982, and as distinguished professor from 2012 to 2023. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Lubbock Christian University recognizes Doctors Stephen and Emily Young Lemley for their many years of distinguished service in Christian education and Christian example, and extends to them the university's appreciation for their faithful service and its deepest admiration for their Christian example. And furthermore, hereby bestows upon Dr. Stephen S. Lemley the title of Distinguished Professor Emeritus, signed this day. Congratulations and thank you.
I'm overwhelmed, really, by all of this. Thank you so much for being here, and for those who have said such kind things about us from this podium at this time. And I'm going to have to work pretty hard to live up with some of the stuff that you have said. What? You can't hear me. Now can you hear me? I have to start over. Thank you so much for being here. When I was just starting to be president in 1982, Mark was, of course, at home. He was our youngest child. He still is our youngest child. As you saw. Well, never mind. But anyway, Mark observed how much time I was having to spend away from home. My thought was that we needed to be seen in Dallas and Fort Worth and Houston and other Texas towns if we were going to raise the funds that we needed to have. And so I was, for a period of time, just gone quite a lot. And Mark, I will always remember this. Mark cornered me one day. He's here tonight, by the way. You know he's back here. Thank you, Mark, for reading and for the way you did that. That was beautiful. But Mark was a little boy, and he said, Daddy, why are you working so hard? Why are you going away to so many places? And why are you helping Lubbock Christian College like that? And I said, well, Mark, it's because I love this institution of Lubbock Christian College. And he said, yeah, Dad, does it love you back? Look around, Mark. Again, thank you so much for your wonderful comments. I'm afraid I can't live up to very many of them. The year that I became president in 1982, the people who were so helpful to me as I adjusted to the new role, and who continued to work with me directly all the way through that time. The person at the top of that list, I hope you are hearing me, the person at the top of that list was Catherine Thompson. She was I don't know what, she was not the office manager. She was just with me every day in the office and kept away the people that she knew I shouldn't be talking to, and letting the people in that I should be talking to. Catherine knew everything that was going on within the institution. I don't know how she knew, but she did. And she would help me understand what was happening sometimes. She was very aware of the leaders in the community of Lubbock, more so than I was, and essentially sent me out to meet these people, to talk to these people, and to let them know more about the school. Catherine Lynch Thompson, was right at the top of the list of those that I worked directly with for so long. But there were others. A list that is probably pretty complete in terms of those who worked with me. They all filled roles that they were assigned. John King, who's here tonight. John, where are you? There you are. John King was top of the list. He was a great student recruiter, and when I became president, decided that he needed to become a great fundraiser, and he did. And we worked together, we traveled together, and we raised money. And I will always appreciate John and his support. Bill Phillips, who's here tonight. Bill, where are you? I saw you come in. Bill was the one who managed the money, and he was the one who kept me from spending it. Bill was great at his work, great at his job. Don Williams, you've been meeting him. Steve Ekman, who is, I don't know where Steve is now, but he was an important part of that group that we met regularly to make our plans. Don Williams, Jerry Perrin, Dale Simpson, and interestingly, Tim Perrin, who was a senior, as he mentioned. I was trying to do more to get attention for Lubbock Christian University by going up into the Panhandle and even getting across into Oklahoma. And John was the one who was scheduling preaching appointments for me at all of these churches. And he would just let me know where I was going next Sunday. And I did that by myself for a good long while, driving and all of that, and preaching and then driving some more. And while I was doing that, I would ask them, can I also teach your high school class? I thought, this would be a good way to maybe bring some extra students in. And I found out I wasn't very good at that. I was pretty good in the pulpit, but not in the high school class. And so I asked Tim, who was the student body president here, if he would go with me and teach the college class. And he agreed to. And then I said, how about you drive too? And he did that. We did that. I don't know how long we did this, Tim, but it was a good long while. Yeah, we did it together, and we recruited students, and I took a lot of criticism from people who wanted to talk to me about things they didn't like about Lubbock Christian University. Lubbock Christian University. But it was a good thing that we did, and I think it was actually very helpful. So these are people that come to my mind so often, but so do so many others. Faculty members, other staff, people who gave their hearts and soul to their work during the years that I was as responsible, or was trying to be as responsible as I was supposed to be in that work. So, 51 years, yeah. Part of the reason why we're all here tonight is I woke up one morning about a month ago, and I was wondering, how long have I been working in higher education, Christian higher education? And in my head, I worked it out, and I said, 51 years? Wow, that seemed like a long time at the moment. And the second thing was that I thought, I think that's enough. And we're not leaving town, and we're not leaving the campus for that matter. But I am leaving the regularity of teaching, and I'm not responsible for anything. I loved my time at Pepperdine as well, I must say. Emily and I met here. I had in mind that as we seemed to be falling in love with one another, with the help of David Stewart, really true. I didn't know what to do. He told me what to do. I did it, and the rest of the story is, anyway, never mind. But we have loved the work that we've been able to do here. We're very thankful for it. We are quite amazed. Somebody approached me it's been several months ago, maybe even close to 2 years ago, and they said, Dr. Lemley, you saved Lubbock Christian University. And my response to that was, every president has saved Lubbock Christian University. And it is true. It is true. We are in a much better position now than we ever were during the times that I was working in that role. And I'm very thankful for that. It's so good to be a part of it. Very thankful. And at Pepperdine, I loved working with David Davenport. He is no longer part of the Pepperdine family, but he was there for a good long while. I was in my 11th year of being the president here, and I was growing a bit weary. And David called me one day and said, would you be willing to come back and be our provost? We need a provost. And I thought, well, think about it. We talked about it, and we decided, okay, we're California bound. So we left. We were there for, how long, 8 years? And then we were back here. And I've been teaching here primarily ever since, and loved every minute of it. And loved the people who are around me, who are faculty and staff, good people here, such good people. I'm very thankful to have been a part of the Lubbock Christian University story. Thank you.
It's my honor to close things out tonight. The program says that I am supposed to deliver a message from the church. That's intimidating. It feels like a superpower to get to speak for the church. Here's the message from the church. Thank you. Thank you. I think the word for me that sums up Steve and Emily's relationship to the church is hope. And they have been ministers within and to the church, ministers of hope for a long time. Yeah. You've heard the ways that they have taught in Bible classes, served as an elder. How many classes has Emily taught in community Bible study through the years, both in Southern California and here? Maybe the most powerful sign of that ministry, at least for me, is their magazine, Power for Today. Raise your hand if you have read or have heard of Power for Today. Yeah, that is a ministry of love that they have been doing since 1975. It was started by Emily's parents, Norval and Helen, and now my wife Amy has continued that family tradition, working with Power for Today. If you want to write for it, let them know. It turns 70 next year, and the steady drumbeat of this is hope. No matter what's going on in the culture, no matter what hand-wringing the church is doing, no matter how anxious the church is feeling, no matter the debates, this has been a steady word of hope. And that is not thin optimism. It is hope that is rooted in the reality of the resurrection of Jesus and his coming glory. So this is a very Christ-centered hope. That has been their gift to the church, and we thank you for it. And I will also tell you that it's not naive hope. They're not naive about the church. Steve and Emily, a few years ago, had come out to Idalou for Easter, and I preached an Easter sermon that is very forgettable. But the conversation at our house afterward over lunch was not. I had preached on those remarkable women who went and discovered Jesus' resurrection that morning, that great Easter morning. And I'd reflected on the fact that these women, I was asking the question, why were they even going there? He's dead. It's over. And Steve said the remarkable thing is they were going to tend to the broken body of Christ. And I have not forgotten that. And I have used that with my own ministry majors. The work you do in ministry is to tend to the very often broken body of Christ. So their word of hope to the church has been a word of hope, understanding the reality, but getting us all to lift our heads up and look into the future. Thank you for your ministry of hope, and the church loves you back. Let us let's conclude by giving God thanks. Lord, we thank you so much for Steve and Emily Lemley. Thank you for the gifts that you gave them, that you have inspired within them, for the countless blessings they have given to so many of us who are here and those who are not here. They're countless. You have used their lives for purpose, and their lives have mattered to us all. And so our hearts are full of gratitude. And now we ask that you would continue to inspire them in their ongoing ministry of hope as they lead us into the future that heads to your glorious ending of all things. We offer you our praise and glory in the name of Christ. Amen. Go with God.